May 15th, 1943, 2:47 p.m. Farnborough, England. The metal shed smells like oil and rust. Major General Percy Hobart stands alone in front of a Sherman tank that looks like someone attached a rotating barrel of chains to its front. The chains spin in circles, thrashing against the concrete floor with a deafening metallic scream, 140 rotations per minute. Clang, clang, clang. The sound echoes off the corrugated steel walls. He's 58 years old. Too old for war, some say. His hands are stained with engine grease. His uniform jacket hangs on a nearby hook because he's been working with his hands all morning, not sitting behind a desk like a proper general should. Outside, 3 colonels from the War Office watch through the window. They're not impressed. One of them laughs. Another shakes his head. They've come all the way from London to see what this madman has been wasting resources on. The rotating chains slam into a buried practice mine. Boom. The explosion sends dirt flying. The chains keep spinning. Another mine. Boom. Another. Boom. 5 mines cleared in 30 seconds. But the colonels are already walking back to their car. Circus equipment, one mutters. Hobart's lost his mind. They don't know it yet. But this circus equipment, these ridiculous-looking tanks that everyone's laughing at, will save thousands of Allied lives in exactly 1 year. They will be the difference between victory and catastrophic failure on the beaches of Normandy. This is the story of a man who built machines so strange that his own side tried to stop him, so unconventional that he was forced into retirement, so brilliant that when D-Day came, the Supreme Allied Commander would call his inventions absolutely crucial to our success. But first, he had to survive the skeptics. Percy Cleghorn Stanley Hobart was born in 1885 inches, Naini Tal, India, where his father served as a secretary to the British government. The first sound he remembers is not gunfire or tank engines, it's the rhythmic clatter of his mother's sewing machine, fixing his father's torn uniform sleeves every evening. His childhood was ordinary, boring, even. He attended Clifton College in Bristol, a school for boys who were expected to become clerks or teachers. Not warriors, not innovators, certainly not military revolutionaries. But Percy had a problem. He couldn't stop asking, why? Why do soldiers march in straight lines when bullets don't care about formation? Why do we use horses when machines exist? Why do we follow tactics from 1915 when it's 1935? His instructors found him annoying. His classmates found him odd. But Percy didn't care. He joined the Royal Engineers in 1904, not because he dreamed of glory, but because he was fascinated by how things worked. Bridges, fortifications, the mathematics of destruction and construction. For 20 years, he was unremarkable. A competent officer, nothing special. He served in France during World War I, not on the front lines, but in the rear, building infrastructure. While other men earned medals for bravery, Percy earned commendations for efficiency. He made sure supplies reached the trenches on time. He designed better drainage systems so soldiers didn't drown in mud. Nobody writes songs about drainage systems. Then, in 1923, everything changed. The British Army formed its first experimental tank unit. Percy requested a transfer. His superiors were surprised. Why would a 8-year-old engineer want to join an experimental program that might not even exist in 5 years? Because tanks are the future, Percy said, and we're using them like cavalry horses. He was right. At the time, British doctrine treated tanks as mobile artillery, slow, heavily armored boxes that crawled behind infantry. Percy saw something different. He saw speed, maneuverability, the ability to break through enemy lines before they could react. In 1934, he took command of the 1st Tank Brigade in Egypt. This is where Percy Hobart became Hobo, a nickname given by his men, some affectionately, some not. He was demanding, obsessive. He made his tank crews train at night, in sandstorms, in conditions that other commanders considered impractical. War doesn't wait for good weather, he told them. He developed new tactics, fast-moving formations that could strike deep into enemy territory, coordinated attacks, using radio communication, something most commanders still considered unreliable technology. He pushed his tanks to their limits, often breaking them, which made the maintenance crews hate him. But his methods worked. During exercises in Egypt, his tank brigade defeated forces 3 times its size. British generals took notice. Some were impressed. Most were threatened. Percy wasn't just proposing new tactics, he was proving that the entire British armoured doctrine was obsolete. In 1938, he published a paper titled The Future of Armoured Warfare. In it, he argued that the next war would be won by whoever could move fastest, not shoot hardest. He predicted that Germany would use massed tank formations to overwhelm France. The British General Staff filed his report and ignored it. 2 years later, Germany invaded France with massed tank formations and overwhelmed them in 6 weeks. Percy Hobart had been exactly right, but instead of being celebrated, he was forced into retirement in 1940. The official reason was reaching retirement age. The real reason was simpler. Too many senior officers found him difficult, too opinionated, too willing to challenge authority, too obsessed with being right instead of being polite. At 55 years old, Percy Hobart joined the Home Guard, the civilian defense force made up of men too old or unfit for regular service. He spent his days teaching shopkeepers and farmers how to use rifles. At night, in his small cottage in Chipping Warden, he sketched designs for specialized tanks in notebooks that nobody would ever read. He had been cast aside, forgotten, a brilliant mind wasted because he didn't know how to play politics. But then, Winston Churchill intervened. Churchill had a problem. Britain needed to invade France eventually. Everyone knew this. The Americans were pressuring for a second front. Stalin was demanding it, but the British High Command had no idea how to actually do it. Every analysis came back with the same conclusion: catastrophic casualties. The Germans had been fortifying the French coast for over a year. Bunkers, minefields, beach obstacles, artillery positions on cliffs. Any invasion force would be slaughtered before they got off the beaches. Churchill remembered Percy Hobart, the difficult, brilliant engineer who'd been forced into retirement. He sent a personal letter. "Come to London. I need your brain." Percy took the train up from Chipping Warden. He wore his old uniform, cleaned and pressed by his wife. He brought 3 notebooks filled with sketches and ideas he'd been working on in his exile. Nobody had asked to see them, but he'd kept drawing anyway, because that's what obsessed people do. The meeting was at the Cabinet War Rooms, underground beneath Whitehall. Churchill was blunt. "We're going to invade France. The generals say it's impossible. I'm asking you to make it possible." Percy opened his first notebook. The pages were covered in drawings of tanks that looked nothing like tanks. Tanks with rotating chains on the front. Tanks carrying massive bundles of wooden fascines. Tanks with bridge-laying equipment. Tanks that could swim. Churchill studied the drawings. He didn't laugh. "Explain." Percy pointed to the first sketch. "The biggest killer on a beach assault will be mines. The Germans are planting thousands of them. We need a way to clear a path before the infantry lands." He explained the Krabbe-Sherman tank, fitted with a rotating drum of chains on the front. The chains would flail the ground ahead of the tank, detonating mines safely. 140 rotations per minute. Each chain strike could trigger a mine or penetrate hard ground to find buried ones. "It looks absurd," Churchill said. "It works," Percy replied. "I've tested it." The second design was even stranger. Tanks carrying enormous bundles of wooden fascines. Essentially giant bundles of logs and sticks, 6 feet in diameter, wrapped in chains. These could be dropped into anti-tank ditches or trenches, creating an instant bridge for other vehicles to cross. The third design was a bridge-laying tank. It could deploy a 30-foot bridge in under 2 minutes, strong enough to support a Churchill tank weighing 40 tons. Churchill leaned back. "The generals will hate these." "The generals hated my tactics in Egypt," Percy said. "Then Germany proved I was right, by conquering France in 6 weeks, using exactly the methods I'd proposed." Churchill smiled. It wasn't a pleasant smile, it was the smile of a man who'd found a weapon. "I'm giving you command of the 79th Armored Division. Build me these machines. I don't care if the generals like them, I care if they work." Percy Hobart was back, but the resistance was immediate and fierce. The British General Staff didn't want him. The Ministry of Supply didn't want to divert resources to experimental equipment. Tank commanders didn't want to sacrifice firepower for circus tricks. At every meeting, Percy faced the same questions. Why waste a perfectly good Sherman on a mine-clearing device? Just use mine detectors and infantry. Percy's response was always the same. Because infantry with mine detectors move at 2 miles per hour and die when they find mines. My crab moves at 5 miles per hour and survives the explosions. Why not just use artillery to clear the beaches? Because artillery can't guarantee 100% clearance. One missed mine kills a tank. One killed tank blocks the advance. One blocked advance means the entire invasion stalls, and men die by the thousands while pinned on the beach. But the real resistance wasn't about tactics. It was about control. Percy was proposing a fundamental change to how the British Army thought about armor. Tanks weren't just weapons. They were tools. Specialized equipment for specialized problems. This meant that tank crews would need specialized training. It meant resources would be diverted from proper fighting tanks to these strange variants. Most importantly, it meant admitting that the current doctrine was inadequate. Senior officers don't like admitting that. In March 1942, Percy presented his designs to a committee of 15 generals. He brought prototypes, working models, test footage showing crabs clearing minefields, Fascine tanks crossing ditches, Churchill tanks deploying bridges. The generals watched in silence. Then one of them stood up. "This is not how the British Army fights. We are not in the business of building novelty equipment." Another agreed. "Our tanks should be focused on destroying enemy tanks, not playing engineer." A third was more direct. "General Hobart, your obsession with these contraptions is wasting valuable resources that should be used to build more fighting tanks." Percy remained calm. He'd expected this. "May I ask a question?" "Go ahead." On D-Day, when thousands of British soldiers are pinned down on a beach, surrounded by mines, facing fortified positions, with their tanks stuck in ditches and anti-tank obstacles, what exactly will building more fighting tanks accomplish? Silence. "These aren't novelty equipment," Percy continued. "They're the difference between a successful invasion and a massacre. Every crab tank can clear a path through a minefield in minutes instead of hours. Every Fascine tank can cross an obstacle that would otherwise require engineers under fire to spend half a day building a bridge. Every Churchill AVRE can demolish a bunker that would otherwise require infantry to assault at point-blank range." One general, younger than the others, spoke up. "But General, these tanks look ridiculous. The men won't respect them." Percy's response was sharp. "The men will respect what keeps them alive. I'd rather command a ridiculous-looking tank that works than a dignified-looking coffin." But no one knew what was coming. The real battle wasn't with the generals. It was with the Americans. In late 1942, American forces arrived in Britain to prepare for the invasion. General Dwight D. Eisenhower, Supreme Allied Commander, reviewed all planned equipment. When he saw Hobart's Funnies, his reaction was the same as most British generals: skepticism. "General Hobart," Eisenhower said, "the United States Army has built the finest tanks in the world. The Sherman is reliable, mass-produced, and battle-tested. Why should we complicate our logistics with these specialized variants?" Percy had prepared for this. He took Eisenhower to the testing grounds at Orford Ness. He showed him a minefield, a real one, with live mines. "General Eisenhower, please watch." A standard Sherman tank attempted to cross the minefield using the traditional method. Infantry with mine detectors walking ahead, probing the ground. It took 40 minutes to clear a path 50 yards long. The infantry were exhausted. One mine detonated accidentally, wounding 2 men. Then Percy sent in a crab. The tank's chains spun at 140 revolutions per minute. The ground erupted in a series of controlled explosions. Boom, boom, boom. In 5 minutes, the crab had cleared a path, twice as long as the infantry had managed in 40 minutes. Eisenhower said nothing. Percy continued. "Now, the ditch problem." They drove to a section where engineers had dug an anti-tank ditch 12 feet wide, 8 feet deep. A standard Sherman approached, stopped, couldn't cross. Engineers would need to build a bridge, which would take hours under fire. A Fascine tank rolled up. It dropped its massive bundle of logs into the ditch. Crash. The bundle settled. The Fascine tank drove across. Then 3 more Shermans crossed behind it. Total time, 90 seconds. Eisenhower looked at Percy. "How many of these do you have?" "Not enough," Percy said, "because your staff keeps denying my requisition requests." The American general smiled slightly. "That's about to change." "Who?" But even with Eisenhower's support, the system was killing them. Slowly, systematically. Production delays, supply shortages, Bureaucratic resistance. Every week, Percy had to fight for resources that should have been automatic. Every month, he had to justify his division's existence to officers who still believed these machines were unnecessary. Meanwhile, German intelligence was learning about the invasion preparations. Rommel was reinforcing the Atlantic Wall. More mines, more obstacles, more bunkers. The clock was ticking. Percy worked 18-hour days. His engineers worked around him. They modified Shermans and Churchills, turning fighting tanks into specialized equipment. They tested every design to destruction, then rebuilt and tested again. One young engineer, Lieutenant James Carter, asked Percy a question late one night. "Sir, what if it doesn't work? What if we get to Normandy and these machines fail?" Percy looked at him. "Then thousands of men will die unnecessarily. And it will be my fault." The weight of that responsibility was crushing. Percy knew what failure meant. He'd studied the Dieppe raid of 1942, a disastrous amphibious assault, where Canadian forces suffered 60% casualties in 9 hours. The tanks couldn't get off the beach. The infantry was slaughtered. It was a preview of what would happen at Normandy if the specialized armor didn't work. But there was another pressure. Time. D-Day was scheduled for early June, 1944. Percy had less than 18 months to design, build, test, and train crews for an entire division of specialized armor. It wasn't enough time. It would never be enough time. His health deteriorated. He lost weight. He stopped sleeping properly. His wife begged him to rest. He refused. "If I rest," he said, "Mendy." By April 1944, the 79th Armored Division had approximately 1,500 specialized vehicles. Crabs for mine clearing, crocodiles that shot flame, Churchill AVREs with petard mortars for bunker busting, fascine carriers, bridge layers, swimming DD tanks. The British called them Hobart's Funnies. The name was not a compliment, it was mockery. But Percy didn't care about mockery anymore. He cared about June 6th, 1944, June 5th, 1944, 11 p.m. Portsmouth Harbor. The smell is overwhelming. Diesel fuel, salt water, vomit from seasick soldiers, oil from thousands of idling engines. The harbor is packed with landing craft, each one crammed with men and machines. Percy Hobart stands on the dock, watching his specialized tanks being loaded onto LCT's landing craft. Tank. Each vehicle represents months of work, years of fighting with bureaucrats, everything he's staked his reputation on. A young tank commander approaches. Lieutenant David Holbrook, 22 years old, crab tank operator. His hands are shaking slightly. It's cold, maybe 50 degrees Fahrenheit, but that's not why he's shaking. "Sir," Holbrook says, "permission to speak freely?" "Always," Percy replies. "Sir, what if the chains break? What if the crab mechanism jams? What if—" Percy interrupts gently. "Then you reverse, signal for backup, and another crab continues the path. You've trained for this. You know the procedures." "But sir, the men are calling them circus equipment. They're saying we're going to get laughed at." Percy turns to face the young lieutenant directly. "Lieutenant Holbrook, in approximately 8 hours, you're going to drive your tank onto a beach covered in mines. Behind you will be hundreds of infantry who are trusting you to clear a safe path. They don't care if your tank looks silly. They care if you keep them alive." He pauses. "Tomorrow, nobody will be laughing." Holbrook salutes and returns to his crew. Percy walks along the dock. He passes fascine tanks, each carrying its massive bundle of logs wrapped in chains. He passes Churchill AVREs with their petard mortars. He passes crocodile flame tanks with fuel trailers attached. In his mind, he runs through every possible failure point. The crab chains could break under stress. Solution: each tank carries spare chains. Replacement time: 15 minutes. The hydraulics on bridge layers could fail. Solution: manual deployment option. Time: 5 minutes longer. The fascines could shift during transport. Solution: triple wrapped chains with reinforced bindings. But there's one variable he can't control: human faith. The tank crews believe in the equipment because they've trained with it. The infantry trusts the tank crews because they've seen demonstrations. But the generals, some of them still doubt, still believe this is an elaborate waste of resources. Percy has one ace left. Earlier that day, he'd received a message from Eisenhower. General Hobart, I've reviewed all assets for Operation Neptune. Your specialized armor will lead the assault on Gold, Juno, and Sword beaches. The American forces have declined to use them on Utah and Omaha. We'll see tomorrow which decision was correct. Translation: the Americans think they can do it without Hobart's funnies. The British are betting everything on them. It's the ultimate test. If the specialized tanks work, Percy will be vindicated. His career, his reputation, his obsession, all justified. If they fail, thousands die, and he becomes the fool who convinced Britain to waste resources on circus equipment. The weight of that calculation sits in his chest like a stone. He thinks about his father, the civil servant in India, who never took risks, who always followed the rules, who lived a safe, comfortable, utterly unremarkable life. Percy has done the opposite. Broken rules, challenged superiors, risked everything on an idea. Tomorrow, he'll find out if he was brilliant or delusional. There's no turning back now. The loading is complete. The weather report is marginal, high winds, rough seas, but acceptable. Eisenhower has made the decision. D-Day is a go. Percy Hobart returns to his headquarters tent. He won't cross the channel. He's not a beach assault commander. He's an engineer. His job was to build the machines. Other men will use them. He lies down, fully clothed, and closes his eyes. He doesn't sleep. Instead, he visualizes tomorrow. 0630 hours. Naval bombardment begins. 0725 hours. First wave hits the beach. 0730 hours. Crab tanks start clearing mine paths. 0735 hours. Fascine tanks cross anti-tank ditches. 0740 hours. Churchill AVREs assault fortified positions. 0800 hours. Lanes fully cleared for main force. Or 0730 hours. Crab chains break. Tanks stall. 0735 hours. Infantry pinned down by mines. 0740 hours. Fascines fail to cross ditches. 0745 hours. Assault fails. Casualties catastrophic. Both futures are possible. By this time tomorrow, Percy Hobart will be either a military genius or a disgraced footnote in history. He gets up, walks outside. The harbor is quieter now. Most of the landing craft have departed. In the darkness, he can barely see them, just running lights disappearing into the channel. Somewhere in that darkness, Lieutenant Holbrook is in his crab tank, probably not sleeping either. Somewhere, thousands of soldiers are trying not to think about what's coming. Somewhere, German machine gunners are checking their ammunition and waiting. Percy Hobart stands alone on the dock, watching the last landing craft disappear, and thinks, please work. Please God, let them work. The first crab tank call sign Barracuda hits the beach. Lieutenant Holbrook is driving. His loader, Corporal Matthews, is praying quietly. His gunner isn't saying anything. The beach is chaos. Naval shells are still screaming overhead. Explosions throw sand 50 feet into the air. The noise is indescribable, a continuous roar that makes thinking impossible. Through his periscope, Holbrook sees the obstacles. Wooden stakes driven into the sand. Steel hedgehogs. Belgian gates. And mines. Everywhere. Mines. "Engage, flail!" he shouts. Matthews pulls the hydraulic lever. The drum begins to spin. The chains deploy. 140 rotations per minute. Thwack. 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 The chains slam into the sand ahead of the tank. Boom. The first mine detonates. The explosion is massive. Sand and shrapnel spray across the tank's frontal armor. The chains keep spinning. Boom. 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 3 more mines. In 15 seconds, Holbrook checks his compass. They're supposed to clear a path directly inland, 200 yards, heading 090 degrees. He can barely see through the smoke and dust. Behind him, infantry are exiting their landing craft, crouching behind his tank, using it as mobile cover. Bullets are ricocheting off the armor. German MG-42s are firing from bunkers 300 yards inland. Boom. Boom. 2 more mines. The chains are working. The path is clearing, but the tank is moving slowly 5 miles per hour, which feels like crawling under fire. An armor-piercing round hits the turret. Clang. It doesn't penetrate, but the sound inside the tank is deafening. "Keep moving!" Holbrook shouts, more to himself than his crew. Boom. 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 3 more mines in a cluster. They're 50 yards inland now. The flail is leaving a cleared path behind them, a lane about 10 feet wide, marked by the churned sand and small craters where mines detonated. Behind Holbrook's crab, 3 more crabs are following, clearing parallel lanes. Infantry pour through these lanes. Without them, the soldiers would have to probe for mines manually, a process that would take hours and cost hundreds of lives. Instead, the assault is flowing. Further down the beach, a fascine tank call sign, Buffalo, reaches an anti-tank ditch. The ditch is 12 feet wide, reinforced with concrete sides. A death trap. The commander, Captain William Roberts, positions his tank at the edge. Drop fascine. The hydraulics activate. The massive bundle of logs, 6 feet in diameter, 8 feet long, wrapped in chains releases from the tank's frontal cradle. Crash. The fascine falls into the ditch. The impact is tremendous. Dust and debris fly up. But when it settles, the fascine is firmly wedged, creating a bridge. Roberts drives across. His 40-ton Churchill tank crushes the fascine flat as it crosses, but the logs hold. Behind him, 3 more tanks cross. Then, a half-track. Then trucks carrying ammunition. A lane across an impassable obstacle. 90 seconds from arrival to crossing. At the far end of Gold Beach, a Churchill AVRE call sign Petard engages a fortified bunker. The bunker houses an 88mm gun that's been tearing apart landing craft for the last 10 minutes. The AVRE commander, Major Thomas Drake, maneuvers to within 80 yards. Suicidal range against an 88mm, but the bunker's gun can't depress low enough to hit him at this distance. Load petard, Drake orders. His gunner loads a 40-pound high-explosive flying dustbin mortar round into the petard mortar mounted on the front of the Churchill. Fire! Whoomp. The recoil rocks the entire tank. The projectile arcs through the air, barely supersonic, clearly visible as a tumbling shape. It hits the bunker aperture. The explosion is catastrophic. The entire bunker seems to lift off the ground for a moment. Smoke and concrete dust pour from every opening. When it clears, the 88mm gun is silent, destroyed. Drake doesn't celebrate. Reload. Next target. There are 7 more bunkers on this sector of beach. By 8:15 a.m., the specialized armor has cleared 6 lanes through the minefields, crossed 4 anti-tank ditches, and destroyed 11 fortified positions. Infantry casualties on Gold Beach are significantly lower than predicted. On Juno Beach, Canadian forces supported by Hobart's Funnies are making similar progress. Crabs clear paths, fascines cross obstacles, AVREs demolish bunkers. On Sword Beach, British forces push inland faster than any pre-invasion estimate predicted. But on Omaha Beach, where American forces declined to use the specialized armor, the situation is completely different. At 8:30 a.m., American troops on Omaha are still pinned down at the waterline. Without crabs, they're clearing mines manually under fire. Without fascines, engineers are trying to build temporary bridges across obstacles while being shot at. Without AVREs, infantry are assaulting bunkers with satchel charges at point-blank range. The casualty rate is catastrophic. By 9 a.m., the difference is undeniable. British and Canadian forces are moving inland. American forces on Omaha are barely holding the beach. The specialized armor isn't just working, it's the deciding factor. At 10 a.m., Lieutenant Holbrook's crab has cleared 400 yards inland. He's out of mines to detonate. The flail mechanism is still working, chains intact. Behind him, an entire battalion has advanced safely. He receives a radio message. Barracuda, this is Gold Command. Job well done. Continue inland and provide support as needed. Holbrook looks at his crew. Matthews is grinning. The gunner is laughing from relief and adrenaline. Circus equipment, Matthews says. Right. By noon, Percy Hobart, monitoring reports from Portsmouth, knows the truth. His machines worked. Not perfectly, some crabs broke down. Some fascines were too small for the largest ditches, but well enough. More than well enough. The specialized armor had done exactly what he'd promised it would do, turn an impossible assault into an achievable one. The enemy didn't expect this. German commanders watching from inland positions were stunned. They'd prepared for a conventional beach assault. Minefields would slow the enemy, ditches would stop tanks, bunkers would slaughter infantry. Instead, the Allies had brought solutions to every problem. machines specifically designed to counter each obstacle. One German officer, captured later that day, asked his British interrogators, "What kind of tanks were those? We've never seen anything like them." The answer was simple: tanks built by a man everyone had called crazy. June 7, 1944. Allied headquarters, Portsmouth. The casualty reports arrive in waves. They're not final, won't be for weeks, but the preliminary numbers tell a clear story. Gold Beach. Approximately 400 casualties in the first wave, lower than any estimate. Juno Beach. Approximately 960 casualties, higher than Gold, but still within acceptable parameters. Sword Beach. Approximately 630 casualties. Successful advance inland. Omaha Beach. Approximately 2,400 casualties. Catastrophic. Barely held the beachhead. The pattern is obvious. The beaches with Hobart's Funnies suffered far fewer casualties than Omaha, which had none. General Eisenhower convenes an emergency meeting. Every senior commander attends. The American generals are grim. The British are carefully neutral, not wanting to rub salt in wounds. Eisenhower doesn't waste time. "Gentlemen, I need an honest assessment. Why did Omaha cost us so many men?" An American colonel speaks up. "Sir, the German defenses were stronger than intelligence indicated. The naval bombardment was less effective than—" "I'm not asking for excuses," Eisenhower interrupts. "I'm asking for analysis. What did the British beaches have that we didn't?" Silence. Finally, General Omar Bradley speaks. "The specialized armor, sir. Hobart's tanks." More silence. Eisenhower looks directly at the American generals who'd declined to use the Funnies. "I want every available specialized vehicle transferred to American units immediately. If the British can spare them, I want Crabs and AVREs supporting our advance. Is that clear?" "Yes, sir." But the damage was done. Thousands of American families would receive telegrams over the next weeks. Many of those deaths might have been prevented. That evening, Eisenhower personally writes a letter to Percy Hobart. "General Hobart, your specialized armor proved invaluable during Operation Neptune. The difference in casualties between beaches with and without your equipment speaks for itself. I deeply regret not deploying your vehicles across all landing sectors. That decision cost American lives unnecessarily. You were right. I was wrong. Thank you for your persistence in developing these machines despite resistance from conventional military thinking. Yours, Dwight D. Eisenhower." Percy receives the letter on June 10th. He reads it 3 times. Then he files it away without comment. His wife asks if he feels vindicated. "No," he says quietly. "I feel exhausted. Because the work isn't over. D-Day was just the beginning." The specialized armor's performance on D-Day created immediate pressure for more. Every frontline commander wanted Crabs for mine clearing. Every assault unit requested AVREs for bunker busting. The 79th Armored Division, which had been mocked as Hobart's circus, was suddenly the most requested support unit in the British Army. But production couldn't keep pace with demand. Percy spent the summer of 1944 frantically overseeing production of additional vehicles. The factories in Britain were already at maximum capacity, producing standard tanks and military equipment. Converting Shermans and Churchills into specialized variants required time and expertise that were in short supply. Meanwhile, the political fallout from Omaha Beach was significant. The American press began asking questions. Why were British casualties lower? What equipment did they have that we didn't? Why were American commanders so confident they could succeed without specialized support? The Pentagon launched an internal review. The conclusions were uncomfortable. American military doctrine had prioritized conventional firepower over specialized engineering solutions. The assumption had been that American industrial might producing more standard tanks would overwhelm any obstacle. D-Day proved that assumption wrong. One American tank commander, Captain Robert Miller, submitted a brutally honest after-action report. "We arrived at Omaha Beach with tanks designed to fight other tanks. The enemy didn't bring tanks to the beach. They brought mines, obstacles, and fortifications. Our tanks were the wrong tools for the job. The British brought the right tools." The report was classified for years because it was too politically embarrassing, but the lessons were learned. By July 1944, American forces were integrating specialized armor into their operations. Hobart's 79th Division trained American crews. Crab tanks were transferred to U.S. armored units. Knowledge was shared. Percy's response to all of this was characteristically blunt. It shouldn't have required thousands of deaths to prove that thinking ahead is better than charging blindly. He made enemies with that statement. But by mid-1944, Percy Hobart had enough respect that enemies didn't matter anymore. August 1944. Operation Tractable, Falaise Pocket. Hobart's Funnies proved their worth again. Crab tanks cleared paths through German minefields surrounding Falaise. Fascine tanks crossed anti-tank ditches. Churchill aviaries demolished fortified positions that had held up the advance for days. The Canadian commander, General Guy Simons, wrote in his official report, "Without the specialized armor of the 79th Division, our casualties in breaching the Falaise defenses would have been unacceptable. These machines have revolutionized assault operations." September 1944. Operation Market Garden. The ambitious airborne operation to capture bridges in Holland was a spectacular failure. But one footnote is often overlooked. The specialized armor supporting the ground advance performed flawlessly. Crabs cleared mined roads, bridge-laying tanks replaced destroyed bridges in hours instead of days. The operation failed due to strategic overreach and intelligence failures, not equipment limitations. Percy's machines did their job. The strategy didn't. October 1944. Shelved Estuary. Canadian forces faced some of the most difficult terrain of the war. Flooded polders, extensive minefields, fortified islands. Conventional armor would have been useless. Hobart's Funnies adapted. Specialized Churchill tanks, fitted with waterproofing, waded through flooded areas. Crab tanks cleared beach minefields on Walcheren Island. Crocodile flame tanks cleared fortified positions in close terrain, where conventional weapons couldn't reach. The Scheldt operation showcased the versatility of specialized armor. These weren't one-trick vehicles designed for D-Day and then retired. They were adaptable tools that could be modified for new challenges. Percy had designed them that way deliberately. The basic Sherman and Churchill chassis could be refitted with different equipment depending on the mission. A crab could become a bridge layer. A bridge layer could become an AVRE. Modularity was built into the concept. By late 1944, other Allied nations were copying the concept. Canadian engineers developed their own variants. Polish armored units requested specialized equipment. Even the Americans, initially skeptical, were producing modified Shermans for obstacle clearance. The idea had spread. The innovation had taken root. But there was pushback from unexpected sources. Traditional tank commanders who felt that specialized armor was stealing resources from main battle tanks. One British general complained directly to Percy, "Your division is consuming Shermans that should be going to combat units. We need more fighting tanks, not more circus equipment." Percy's response was measured but firm. "General, how many fighting tanks do you think would be needed to cross a minefield without crabs? How many would be lost? How many crews would die? My circus equipment saves your fighting tanks by clearing the path so they can fight instead of dying on obstacles." The argument was unanswerable, because it was backed by data. Casualty rates, advance speeds, mission success rates, all improved when specialized armor was available. What they didn't expect was the order that came from above. In November 1944, Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery issued a directive. All future offensive operations must include specialized armor support in the planning phase. Commanders who requested operations without accounting for obstacle clearance would have their plans rejected. It was official doctrine now. Hobart's concepts had gone from ridiculous circus equipment to mandatory standard practice in less than 2 years. Percy didn't celebrate. He just kept working. March 1945. Crossing the Rhine. The final proof came at Operation Plunder, the Allied crossing of the Rhine River, Germany's last major defensive barrier. Every military expert predicted catastrophic casualties. The Rhine was 400 yards wide, fast-flowing, heavily fortified on both sides. The Germans had spent months preparing defenses. This would be worse than D-Day, they said. They were wrong. Hobart's 79th Division deployed specialized amphibious tanks, DD duplex drive Shermans, bridge-laying vehicles, and crabs to clear the eastern bank. The crossing, which should have taken days and cost thousands of lives, was accomplished in less than 24 hours with acceptable casualties. General Montgomery, not known for praising subordinates, wrote in his memoirs, "The success of Rhine crossing owed much to the specialized armor. What might have been another Somme was instead a well-executed operation." That's high praise from Montgomery. But the real legacy of Hobart's Funnies wasn't just D-Day or the Rhine. It was how they fundamentally changed military thinking about specialized equipment. Before Hobart, armored vehicles were treated as single-purpose machines. The expectation was simple: a tank should fight, and anything else was an unnecessary compromise. After Hobart, that assumption changed. Armor became a platform, a protected chassis that could carry purpose-built tools for specific tasks. Different missions demanded different equipment, and specialized variants multiplied the effectiveness of forces. That shift reshaped militaries worldwide. The Soviet Union embraced specialization with combat engineer vehicles derived from the same idea: armored bridge layers, tracked bridge carriers, and mine-clearing rollers designed to keep formations moving across contested terrain. The United States developed a lineage of combat engineering vehicles that trace back to Hobart's thinking. Heavy armored engineer tanks, armored combat earthmovers, and modern assault breacher vehicles, each built to solve a discrete battlefield problem. Israel, confronting unique defensive and urban challenges, extended the concept further. Purpose-built combat engineering vehicles, armored bulldozers used for obstacle removal and fortification work, and infantry carrier platforms fitted with mine-clearing attachments all demonstrate the same logic: match the tool to the problem. Today, militaries rarely debate whether to field specialized platforms. The question is, which types best address the particular threats and terrain they expect to face? But Hobart's impact goes beyond vehicle design. His central insight that complex problems require dedicated tools engineered for those problems became a foundation of modern military engineering and innovation. At the U.S. Army Engineer School, Hobart's Funnies are taught not as curiosities, but as a methodology. The lessons emphasize a repeatable process: identify the precise problem, design a specific solution, test rigorously, deploy with confidence, adapt continuously. That framework applies to everything from bridging rivers to clearing explosive hazards. When faced with improvised explosive device threats in recent conflicts, the response was pure Hobart: mine-resistant vehicles, route clearance systems, remote-controlled clearance platforms. Each system was designed to solve a narrowly defined, deadly problem, protecting personnel and enabling maneuver. The lineage is direct. Hobart's mine-clearing devices led to rollers and flails, which evolved into modern route clearance and counter-explosive systems. The mechanical goal, detonate or remove threats ahead of advancing units, remains the same. The technology simply improved. Demolition capability followed a similar arc. The AVRE's demolition charge evolved into demolition tanks and, decades later, into modern breaching vehicles equipped with linear charges and other specialized systems. The mission, reduce fortifications without exposing personnel, has not changed. Mobility solutions also carry Hobart's DNA. Fascine carriers and bridge packages of 1944 evolved into modern armored vehicle-launched bridges and modular bridging systems. The problem how to cross obstacles under protection persisted, and the solution stayed true to Hobart's platform concept. Even amphibious armor shows continuity. Flotation devices and modified hulls from the 1942 informed later generations of amphibious and littoral vehicles. Across 8 decades, the requirement to operate in and across water obstacles kept driving specialized design work. Hobart's innovations had strategic impact, not just tactical utility. Many historians argue that without those specialized vehicles, the cost in lives and time during the Normandy landings would have been far greater. Faster, safer breaching and clearance operations accelerated the advance across occupied Europe, changing campaign timelines in ways that shaped the post-war world. Senior commanders noticed. In his memoir, General Eisenhower singled out the practical impact of the specialized engineering vehicles developed under Hobart's leadership. That endorsement helped cement the idea that innovation could change outcomes on a grand scale. But perhaps the most enduring legacy is institutional. Before Hobart, military development tended toward conservative, incremental change. His work showed that radical, field-focused innovation, driven by teams willing to rethink assumptions, could pay enormous dividends. Afterward, militaries began to create organizations and processes to capture that kind of thinking. Commands and schools tasked with exploring new approaches, innovation hubs to prototype unconventional solutions, and specialized units to field and refine them. Those institutional changes reflect a single lesson: when problems are hard and consequences are high, investing in tailored tools is worth the cost. That lesson echoes through history. Crab mine clearing vehicles led to rollers and modern breachers. AVRE demolition tanks led to contemporary assault breachers. Fascine carriers and bridge rollers evolved into today's armored bridging systems. The problems clearing mines, demolishing obstacles, and bridging gaps remain, and so does the strategy of matching each problem with an engineered response. The Hobart story is taught across staff, colleges, and military academies as a case study in innovation against institutional resistance. It highlights two related challenges: how to identify the precise problem the force faces, and how to build and field a solution despite doctrinal skepticism and resource constraints. Those issues are perennial. When militaries encountered the improvised explosive threat, they did what Hobart had shown decades earlier. They defined the problem tightly, created or adapted platforms to meet it, tested them under operational conditions, and integrated the new tools into doctrine and training. In short, Hobart's influence is everywhere in modern combat engineering. His approach turned individual machines into design patterns, protected mobility, coupled with mission-specific tools. That design philosophy shortens timelines, reduces casualties, and changes the scale of what armed forces can do. Above all, Hobart's work teaches a practical lesson. Institutional inertia is real, but when lives and objectives depend on solutions, focused innovation backed by rigorous testing and rapid adaptation will not only succeed, it will reshape how forces prepare for and fight future conflicts. In 2024, Ukraine faces mine-clearing challenges in territories reclaimed from Russian forces. The solutions being deployed? Descendants of Hobart's designs: mine-clearing rollers, explosive line charges, specialized engineer vehicles. The technology is more advanced. The fundamental concept is identical. In 2023, when analyzing Taiwan defense scenarios, military planners discuss specialized amphibious assault equipment. The reference point? D-Day and Hobart's Funnies. When the U.S. Marine Corps debates force structure, they reference Hobart's principle. Mission-specific equipment delivers disproportionate results. 80 years later, Percy Hobart's influence shapes military operations globally. Hobart's Funnies. From Normandy to the Rhine, by Richard Doherty. 79th Armored Division. Hobart's Funnies, by Patrick Delaforce. D-Day. The Battle for Normandy, by Anthony Beaver. Extensive coverage. The Second World War, by John Keegan. Strategic analysis. These aren't obscure military history books. They're standard references taught at West Point, Sandhurst, and military academies worldwide. In 1946, Percy Hobart was knighted. Sir Percy Hobart, Knight Commander of the Order of the Bath. The citation was simple: for exceptional service in the development of specialized armor vehicles that contributed significantly to the success of Allied operations in Northwest Europe. But the real validation came quietly, in memoirs written by soldiers who used his equipment. The crab saved my life. Private James Morrison, Gold Beach. Without the AVRE, we'd still be stuck at that bunker. Sergeant David Price, Sword Beach. Those ridiculous-looking tanks turned out to be the smartest things anyone brought to Normandy. Captain Robert Hastings, Canadian 3rd Division. Sometimes the rules need to be broken to save lives. Percy Hobart broke every rule about how armor should be designed and deployed, and he saved thousands of lives doing it. February 19th, 1957, Farnham, England. Percy Hobart died at age 71 inches his sleep. Heart failure. Peaceful. Quick. He'd retired from the army in 1946, knighted and respected, but never fully comfortable with fame. He preferred his workshop to ceremonies, preferred sketching designs to giving speeches. His funeral was attended by tank commanders from 3 nations: British, American, Canadian. Men who'd used his equipment. Men whose lives had been saved by machines everyone had called ridiculous. Lieutenant Holbrook, now Major Holbrook, retired, attended. He brought the flail chains from his crab tank, preserved as a memorial. These chains cleared a path for hundreds of men, he told Percy's widow. Your husband gave us a chance. The eulogy was read by Field Marshal Montgomery, who'd often clashed with Percy during the war, but respected him deeply. Percy Hobart was difficult, stubborn, unconventional. He challenged orthodoxy at every turn. He made enemies among those who preferred tradition to innovation. But when it mattered, when thousands of lives hung in the balance, his machines worked. His ideas succeeded. His persistence saved the invasion. Percy's wife, Dorothea, requested a simple gravestone. Major General Sir Percy Hobart, KBE, CB, DSO, MC, Iten Barbai Barshawu, Thou Iten Jobai Wushati. He built what others thought impossible. After the war, Percy had lived quietly. He wrote technical papers. He consulted occasionally for the War Office. He spent time with his family. He gardened. He never spoke much about D-Day. When asked, he'd deflect. The men who used the equipment were the heroes. I just gave them tools. But privately, he kept every letter from soldiers who'd written to thank him. Hundreds of letters. He stored them in a wooden box in his study. His wife found them after his death. Sir, I don't know if you remember me, but I was in a crab on Gold Beach. I wanted you to know that I have 3 children now. Thank you for giving me the chance to meet them. General Hobart, I've named my son Percy in your honor. Without your tanks, I wouldn't have made it off Omaha. This from an American soldier. The generals called them Funnies. We called them lifesavers. Percy never responded to these letters. He read them, filed them, kept them. Perhaps he was embarrassed by the gratitude. Perhaps he was simply a private man who did his job and didn't need praise. Or perhaps, deep down, he knew the truth. Innovation is always mocked until it succeeds. And success speaks louder than any words. The unthinkable lesson. Percy Hobart's story isn't just about tanks. It's about persistence in the face of doubt. About trusting your ideas when everyone else calls you crazy. About the courage to be right when being right is unpopular. In 1943, every military expert knew that specialized armor was a waste of resources. They knew that standard tanks were sufficient. They knew that Hobart was wrong. They were all wrong. And thousands of soldiers lived because one stubborn engineer refused to accept common knowledge as final truth. The modern application. This lesson applies today. In every field, in every industry, how many brilliant ideas are dismissed because they seem ridiculous? How many innovations die because the people proposing them lack the political power to push?